Hi, happy Tuesday. I've been asked if I would make a video how to knit. So I'm going to try, let's see if this works. Apparently black wool is pretty hard, but I've got contrasting needles here. Now these are huge needles. They're a 6mm, but I was hoping the bigger the needles, the more I would show you. Today I'm going to show you just a couple of, sorry, I just grabbed my wool, just a couple of stitches, the main ones. I'm not going to show you fancy stitches, I'm just going to show you how to knit and how to purl, and then what's called stocking stitch. And stocking stitch is usually done when you're making jumpers and things. It's usually the finish, you know, like the finish here, they're at the arms, at the bottom of your jumper, you know, the border. And what a stocking stitch is, usually you have an odd number of stitches that you cast onto your needle. Casting on is just making stitches onto your needle. So you usually have an odd number. While we're doing this, I'm just going to simply just make, hopefully you can see this, is just simply make one stitch, and all you do is just like a, you know, just a double knot. That's just your first stitch, okay? And anyway, stocking stitch is you have an odd number, sorry my fingernails are in the way here, of stitches, and your first row is you knit 2, purl, knit, purl. This is each stitch. So you knit 2 stitches, so knit my first stitch, knit the second stitch, purl the third stitch, knit the fourth stitch, till you come to the last 2 stitches where you knit. The second row with the stocking stitch is you knit the first stitch, then you purl the second stitch, knit, purl, till you come to the third row. Again, you knit the first 2 stitches and purl. But I'm just going to show you just knit. So all I have done here is just put a simple, you can see it, just a simple, just, you know, a little, I've just tied that on there just with a little double knot. Now to cast on, put, can you see that? Put your needle through there, get your wool, I'm just going to let my wool go, around the bottom needle. Can you see that? It is around the bottom needle, pull through underneath. Can you see that you've pulled through underneath? So you have now got another stitch. Put that stitch onto your first stitch. You now have 2, pull it a little bit tight, you now have 2 stitches. Go again. So can you see? I have got it underneath. Pull again. Get your wool, put it around the bottom needle, pull underneath the top needle. You see, you've now got another stitch. Put that through. Use your finger if you want, pull that through. You've now got 3 stitches. Now, knitting is simple. To knit, so you've got your knitting like this, put your bottom needle underneath, facing, see, like that. So you've got a bottom needle and a top needle with your stitch. Wind the wool around your bottom needle, pull like that, let that first stitch go. You have just done a knit. I'll show you again a little bit higher. Let's hope this sees underneath, pull at the top around with your yarn, pull underneath, let the top needle stitch go. You've now knitted 2. Let's now do the third. Pull, can you see? I'll put my fingers, see, round like that with the wool, pull underneath, let the top stitch go. You've now got 3 needles on. Now to do a purl, remember I taught you knit went that way, purl goes the opposite way, in that way. So once you've got it, sorry, I don't want to lose stitches here, so I'm trying to get closer. Once you've got it, again, wrap around the bottom needle, pull back over, let the top stitch go. See how that is? Again, it's pretty hard for me because I'm doing it quite a way, is you get underneath the top needle, facing backwards, pull, push under, let the top stitch go, and for the last one, do the same thing. So your bottom one is going underneath, wind that where you've gone underneath around with wool, pull back under, let the top stitch go. There you are, can you see? You have just done some knitting and purling. I'm going to pull out. I will show you, I have done some today. The top bit is knitting and the other side is purling. I'll just show you one more time with my black wool how you get the stitch on. It's just make yourself a little loop, however you make it. See, little loop, put your loop on. Now an easier way, if you're finding it too difficult with 2 needles to make stitches or cast on stitches, I'll teach you a cheat way, is get your wool, right? So you get your wool, make a loop with your hands, right? So with your other hand, so you've got 1 needle, make a loop, twist it around, put it on, tie it up. You see what I have done? That's a cheat way. If you cannot remember how to cast on, how I showed you, get a loop, there's your loop, twist it, put it on your needle. It's probably, I'll try one more time. So there you are, there's your loop, you've just had string, twist it, right, put it on, tie it. That's a cheat way. That's a cheat way of casting on stitches. Can you see? My way that I showed you of casting on stitches was you get your other needle, here's your other needle, put in under the last stitch you have made, there you are, put the yarn, the wool, under on the bottom stitch that hasn't got stitches on it, go back under the loop with that new stitch that you've put it on like that. That's the proper way of casting. If you would like me to repeat how to knit and purl, which are your basic stitches, knitting, remember, is get your needle and put that way. So can you see that? That way. That is knitting. So with your bottom needle, you wrap your yarn around that way, pull this needle back under so that the stitch stays on here and the top stitch goes off. Purl is the opposite way. Can you see? The opposite. That's purl. And again, you wrap your yarn. So when you're knitting, to know that you are actually knitting, knitting is yard forward. When you are purling, because it's going round the other way, the yarn is this way. So sorry, I'll just make sure that you understand. Knitting, yarn is backward. Purling, the yarn comes forward because you're doing that way. I hope I have given you an idea. It is pretty hard to teach knitting without you actually seeing somebody in front of you, and I tried to get the biggest needles as possible. So what you can do, and I'll write it on a piece of paper, is an easy way to cast on to make yourself a scarf is get a fairly big needle, say round about the size of 6mm needle, and cast on, that's make, cast on is make, cast on round about 19 to 25 stitches, depending how you want it. Make sure that it is an odd number. So your first row is you knit the first stitch, you knit the second stitch, you purl the third stitch, then you knit to the last 2 stitches on your needle where you knit. The second is knit, purl, knit, purl, knit each stitch. This is called your border, and this is also known as stocking stitch. So I'll just show you if you can see that. You will then, this is pretty simple knitting skills, knitting and purling. So again, knitting, just to help you, is the yarn is at the back, purl, the yarn is at the front. I'm just going to draw like a needle, a knitting needle. That's your top here, and bottom for knit. Top, purl. This diagram, I hope, may help you, remind you. Down the back, I will redo this video if people ask me to, because they couldn't understand. And I want to thank you. Knitting helps. I will also can teach you basic crochet to do chain stitch and double stitches, but that is even harder to do a video of. Anyway, I hope I've given you some ideas. There is a website that you can go to that might be able to help, and it's called Knit Picky, P-I-C-K-Y, Patterns at All Free Knitting. Google that. You can actually print off some knitting patterns there, and they might be able to give, I think there's knitting lessons there available. So yeah, thank you for watching. As I said, normally when you do knitting, you don't use big ones like that. I was just showing you different knitting. If you come across a pattern that has knitting needles where they're both ends, that's what it looks like. There's no, and so you'll have to be careful with that because you can easily lose your stitches off that. So that's open-ended knitting needles, and you also can get like a stitch holder, which is like a massive big kind of like safety pin, for want of a better word, and it holds your work for you. And there's also circular needles, because sometimes you might be making something, knitting something that's circular and have to stop. But I'm getting advanced here. I'm only really an beginner knitter myself. When you start to do fancy knits, they actually tell you how to do it. So with a fancy knit, without trying to confuse you, the pattern might be knit one, then let a stitch go, so it's like you're making a little hole, and then you have to make up the stitch. But that's for advanced. So I hope I've helped you just learn the basics of knit and purl. And once you just know that, you can just, if you want, you can just make a scarf just totally knitting, totally purling, doing what, you can mix and match, whatever. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye, and thank you for giving me the idea. Love to you all. Bye. Have a good night. Bye.